All right, before we jump into A Midsummer Night's Dream, let's talk about some of the things that Shakespeare's original audience would just know. They'd show up at the theater, and it's the background knowledge that's just part of their society, part of their upbringing, and they bring that to the experience of the play. And now in 2021, we probably have lost some of that background knowledge. But it's helpful because Shakespeare makes these allusions, Allusion, to certain myths, Greek myths, even English folklore with the fairy folklore. He makes allusions to the famous Pyramus and Thisbe myth. So we should probably have a good idea of what that stuff is as we enter our experience with this play, as we enter the reading experience. So let's start here. Let's start with where this play came from. Shakespeare was commissioned to write this play for a wedding ceremony, an actual real live wedding ceremony. We're not exactly sure whose. Some duke in Elizabethan England had asked or hired Shakespeare's company to perform the wedding entertainment. So Shakespeare got a little creative on this. He's like, oh, I'm going to make some money on this one. What am I going to do as a wedding present for this duke? And the result is something like when you're looking in a mirror and you have a mirror behind you and it just makes that reflection like go on forever. That's what Shakespeare does with this play. So there's this actual real wedding in the real world of a duke marrying a duchess. And Shakespeare decides that his play to celebrate that wedding is going to be about a duke and a duchess getting married, and they need a play to celebrate that wedding. So there's a play within the play, that there's this fictional play for these fictional people, the Duke and Duchess getting married, which is actually the real play for the real Duke and Duchess getting married. And it kind of blows the mind a little bit. It's cool. It's cool how he does that. So part of the funny part about this is that the fictional play for the fictional wedding is just a hot mess. It's all over the place. And it's a terrible choice for a wedding ceremony, to celebrate a wedding ceremony. I'll tell you about Pyramus and Thisbe in a bit, but this fictional play of Pyramus and Thisbe is to celebrate the Duke Theseus and his wedding to Hippolyta. So what you can see there is that Shakespeare's like, look at this fictional play. It's terrible for this wedding. Maybe my actual play that you're watching right now is terrible for this real wedding. All right? So that's the original setting, that this would have been performed at a wedding ceremony. And so we almost need to visualize the wedding banquet table set up there with the groom and the bride and all the attendants alongside. And then this play is happening right in front of them. Okay, next, let's talk about Pyramus and Thisbe. So Pyramus and Thisbe is this ancient legend about two young lovers who fall in love, and it's a forbidden love because their parents can't get along. Sound familiar? Basically, when Shakespeare comes along and he writes Romeo and Juliet, he rips it right out of the legend of Pyramus and Thisbe. And original people who went to Romeo and Juliet would have recognized that. They would have been like, oh, this is just a retelling of Pyramus and Thisbe. So the legend goes like this, that these two young lovers, forbidden to see each other, actually are neighbors, and they share a common wall. And then, the one house butts up to the other, and there's a hole in the wall. I know it sounds silly to even say it, but they would press up against this hole and whisper their love to each other through this hole. And, their love grows as they are like, oh, I love you. Oh, I love you too, whispering through the hole in the wall. And they decide they're going to go get married. So Pyramus tells Thisbe, meet me out at this tomb outside of the city, and we'll run away, and we'll elope, and we'll get married. So Thisbe agrees, okay, I'll meet you there. And she arrives at the tomb a little early. When she gets to the tomb, there is a mountain lion nearby who has just killed a sheep. And it's got like the blood all over its jaws and everything. And the mountain lion starts coming towards Thisbe, and she freaks out and she runs away. Well, of course she would, right? The lion's coming. When she runs away, she drops her scarf. So the lion comes and he sniffs the scarf and he picks it up and he maws on the scarf and he gets blood all over the scarf. And then the lion takes off. Well, Pyramus ends up showing up on time. He sees the bloody scarf and concludes that Thisbe was eaten by a lion. So in true Romeo and Juliet tragedy fashion, he then takes out his sword and he says, I'm not going to live without her, right? This life isn't worth it without her. Some weird romantic notion that probably isn't romance at all. And he kills himself. By the way, this legend is to explain why mulberries are red. Apparently, mulberries used to be white, but like a lot of myths, we want to explain how things are in nature. Mulberries are red because when Pyramus stabs himself, his blood squirts up over this mulberry tree that was nearby and stains all the berries red, and to this day we have red berries. Thisbe comes back after the mountain lion's gone to find Pyramus has stabbed himself. She understands what has happened, and then predictably she takes her own life. This is Romeo and Juliet. That's exactly how Romeo and Juliet ended. And Shakespeare stole it, for lack of a better descriptor there. So, Pyramus and Thisbe is the play, the fictional play, that these actors are going to put on for the fictional wedding between Theseus and Hippolyta. It's a terrible choice. It's not really romantic. And why would you celebrate a wedding with look at these lovers who killed themselves? So in some way, Shakespeare's saying my play for this wedding is also not suited. My real play for these real people isn't a good match. And this is where it ties in with what we've been talking about with farce and satire, the importance of being earnest, right? Kind of poking fun at the very people who are watching the play. All right, so that's Pyramus and Thisbe, the story you need to know because it's the play within this play. All right, let's take a look at these characters. As we do so, you can type in yours if you haven't already. It's also helpful to know some Greek mythology. So the play itself, A Midsummer Night's Dream, takes place in Athens, Greece. In ancient Athens. Shakespeare's clothing and his actors, we went over this Friday, would have been dressed in modern day clothes, and they would have, not done anything to make it look like ancient Greece. But the characters, is important to know their story. So our first set of characters are the royals. These are the individuals who are getting married. And we have a whole plot here that just involves them. The Duke of Athens is Theseus. And you might remember him from your Greek mythology as the guy who took care of the Minotaur. Well, there's another story about Theseus where he travels to the land of the Amazon women. This land, it's only inhabited by women, and there are these fierce warriors. And he can't help he won't be able to defeat these warriors. I mean, they're famous for fighting. So he actually tricks Hippolyta. All right, so Hippolyta is the queen of the Amazon women. I think I got that right, spelled right. And you probably know her daughter. As legend goes, her daughter becomes Wonder Woman. So if you know the legend of Wonder Woman, she is, from... she's part goddess or, from this race of Amazon women, and she comes out into our world and is able to, save us because she's so amazing. Hippolyta would be her mom in mythology. So Theseus invites is visiting this land and invites Hippolyta onto his boat to just check it out. In which case he then promptly leaves, steals her, basically kidnaps her. And I don't know, she suffers some kind of Stockholm syndrome or something, but she ends up falling in love with Theseus. But he kind of cheated, right? He didn't conquer them at all. He just basically stole Hippolyta while nobody was looking. So when the play starts, it is 4 days away from their wedding. And Theseus decides, we're going to have an amazing wedding. We're going to make this a lot of fun. I need some great entertainment for my wedding. So this is when he calls on his assistant, Philostrate, or Phil. Let's just call him Phil. This is the guy who's going to line up the wedding entertainment, make sure that the cooks are all set and all the food's ready. He is the one who's going to be interviewing the talent for the wedding night. Also in this group is an important nobleman in Athens named Aegis. I like to call him Mad Dad. All right, so he's kind of a traditional. He's a jerk. Let's just put it this way. He's a nobleman jerk who is set in his ways. All right, so this is the first plot. The wedding between Theseus and Hippolyta, which is set for 4 days from now. Now, there's a second group of teenagers. Of course there is. And what we have here is a love rhombus. Oh, by the way, before I go any further, I want to point out here, with the royals, this is not an ideal wedding. Right? I mean, like, we should not be stealing our brides and kidnapping them. So right out of the gate, you'll see that it's kind of a distorted version of love. And Shakespeare's having some fun with that, right? Like, he's going to have this actual wedding. He's going to sully it with a story about these people who probably should not be getting married. Here, he has another love story, and it's this weird love rhombus, if you will. I don't know what that is. It's not a love triangle. It's kind of this love hexagon or something. Let's take a look. We'll start here. There's this girl named Helena who has fallen in love with a guy named Demetrius. We find out that Demetrius spent some quality time with Helena, and now she is madly obsessed with Demetrius. But Demetrius, being a teenage boy and the jerk that he is not returning that love to Helena. Instead, Demetrius has fallen in love with Helena's BFF, a girl named Hermia. Now, Hermia and Helena are best friends. They grew up together. They had their slumber parties together. They tell all their secrets to each other. And Demetrius has now ditched Helena and is pursuing Hermia. But Hermia doesn't like Demetrius. Hermia actually likes this other guy named Lysander. And Lysander loves Hermia back. And so we have here like one solid couple. Hermia and Lysander would like to be together. However, Demetrius wants Hermia and Helena wants Demetrius. You follow? Here's where Dad comes in. Dad has decided at the beginning of the play that his daughter Hermia will be marrying Demetrius. He's decided that Demetrius is somehow a better match, right? And even though Lysander has as much money and his reputation is just as good, the decision is my daughter, will marry Demetrius. And Hermia has a problem with that, leading to Hermia and Lysander making plans in Act 1. I won't spoil it for you, but they're going to do their own thing, as you can probably guess. Okay. Next, we are not done. We have another group of people, and these are the fairies. I don't know. How do you want to spell fairies today? You can I don't know. Isn't there a Y in there? There is some fairy lore that Shakespeare's original audience would be aware of. They would all know who the king and queen of the fairies are. Oberon is the king of the fairies, and Titania is the queen of the fairies. This also, though, is a terrible example of a marital relationship. When the play starts, both Oberon and Titania, that's not how I spell fairies. Let's try that. Oberon and Titania are fighting. And as you know from your Tinkerbell movies, when the fairy world is out of order, so is nature. Like, it's the fairy's job to make sure that nature's running smoothly. Now, you might have heard of the legend of changelings. This would have been told in Elizabethan England in like to little children as horrible bedtime stories. That fairies can go and steal children, human children, and replace them with changelings, so that the parents would never know. Right? It's not actually their child. It's just a being that looks like their child. So when my kid starts acting up, I can be like, "That's not my kid." The fairies replaced him with this changeling child. Well, Oberon has this stolen boy that was replaced with a changeling. Apparently, this is what fairies do. They steal children. And Titania has decided that she wants this human boy for her own servant. And as a result, Oberon and Titania are not talking. They don't even want to be in the same area of the woods together. It's a mess. It's a mess. Every Shakespearean play has comic relief, even the bad ones. Romeo and Juliet, the clown was Mercutio. I mean, until he dies, he's pretty funny, right? He's making all the jokes. He's the life of the party. This play's no different. This is the star of this play, a fairy named Puck. Or Robin Goodfellow is his other name. And in fairy lore, the English would have recognized Puck as the trickster. If you go outside and you slip on the ice and you fall in a puddle, it was probably Puck who did it to you. His whole job is to go and sow chaos in the world, and he's the trickster fairy. So Puck has a big role in this play because he's going to, forgive me, puck it all up. He is Oberon's right-hand man. Oberon needs something done. He calls on Puck, and Puck goes out and do it. Now, meanwhile, Titania has a bunch of servants as well, all of whom are in the natural world. You see a moth in the forest. It's probably not a moth. It's probably one of Titania's servants, the moth fairy. There is peas blossom. There is mustard seed. These are small little servant fairies that look like natural objects. I got moth, peas blossom, mustard seed. I'm missing one. Cobweb. Okay. That these minor little players, and they all are on the queen's side. So our third plot in this play is, are Titania and Oberon going to make up? Are they going to get nature back on course? Can this wedding, or can this marriage be resolved? And finally, there is one last group of people, and these are often referred to as the mechanicals, or the actors. These are everyday Joes who live in Athens, who are going to try to put on a play for Theseus and Hippolyta's wedding. But they're not professional actors. They're not even good actors. They're just kind of like fly-by-night, like community theater actors who wish that they were good. And the director is a guy named Peter Quince, who asks this guy, a guy named Nick Bottom, to be his main actor. Now remember, the play that they are going to perform is Pyramus and Thisbe. And of course, like all Shakespearean plays, any plays in Elizabethan England, all of the actors are men. So the guy, Francis Flute, who's a little effeminate, his voice is a little bit higher, he's going to have to play, and this is, it gets funny because they make a big joke about it. He's going to have to play Thisbe, and Bottom is going to have to play Pyramus. Now, Bottom is an ass. Literally. At one point in the play, Puck, our trickster fairy, is going to turn Bottom's head, Nick Bottom's head, into a donkey. So it's very thinly veiled. Bottom is a jackass, right? Like he literally is a bottom. Bottom is very conceited. He thinks he's way better than he actually is, and that's where a lot of this humor is generated from. Is this guy is not self-aware at all. He doesn't understand how terrible of an actor he actually is. And then we'll just fill this out. The rest, there is Snug, the joiner. There is Snout, the tinker. And, oh, I'm missing one. Snug, Snout, Flute, Bottom. Oh, Robin Starveling, the Tailor. Starveling. Again, just your average Joes who are going to try to put on a play. So it's really 4 stories in one. Can they put together a play? Can they fix their marriage? Can they sort out this little love rhombus going on? And can they successfully have a good wedding with good entertainment in 4 days? And each of these is some kind of story of problem, problematic love on those 3. Here, sorting this out is just hilarity. Okay? Sorry that was kind of long-winded, but important stuff to know as we begin with Theseus and Hippolyta opening up Act 1, Scene 1, talking about how they can't wait to get married in 4 days. And then Dad interrupts, Aegis interrupts, and he's like, hey, Theseus, you got a minute? I want to talk to you about my daughter. I want to force her to either die or marry Demetrius. And Theseus is like, it seems a little bit of overreaction. Why don't we go with giving her 3 choices? She can die, she can marry Demetrius, or she can become a nun. All right? Okay, have fun with Act 1. We'll talk about it.